does salt fermentation get into the seeds in the middle of a cucumber? Koji soy sauce fermentation, and then waterKefir fermentation. So, short answer is yes. The seeds carry the most lectins, followed by the skin, followed by the flesh, and given the water, acid, also saline gradient, it penetrates into the middle, and some bacteria, although resting mostly on the skin, go deep and inactivate the lectins in a variety of ways. Acid, the actual lacto-acid, actobacillus, deactivated. So it does get the seeds and the lectins, usually after 10 days. Most of it's gone. And pickles usually ferment for weeks. So Tef is going to approve. I'm going to cover everything and then post this whole thing, but we're going to focus on those 3 points. So sourdough, you do need to rest, especially if it's non-gluten, 30 to 60 minutes after the final kind of fermentation and before baking it, because like psyllium has to make it into a kind of gel, and similar with sorghum, they don't really have a capture like gluten. They require just leaving it, resting it, proofing it before, and that is a requirement. Also, covering it during the rest and covering it during the bake is required, because it is losing pretty much steam. Since there's no gluten to trap, gas escapes and their crust forms quicker, and you really don't get this big expanded loaf. You get a kind of small bread. That's why you always want to cover it during the proof, cover it during the bake, at least the first round. And if you do that, these are optional. The kind of touch of flour at the end, and then folding, and then spraying water. All that's to prevent this kind of crust from forming early. And so doing those 2 things above, you don't need to do this. And if you can't do, probably result in a higher quality bread, but again, you don't have to if you just want to keep it simple. So the kojiMisoSoySauceFerments are all very similar. So you pretty much use aspergillus to ferment the koji, and once you have koji, you can mix it into anything. You can chickpea, lentils, soybeans, and it will ferment longer. So your koji is starting to ferment longer. Without water, it's called miso. Okay, so you'll see that koji, soybeans, salt, and then just a long time. With water, it's called soy sauce. You pretty much get this moromi? Okay. The actual soy mixture has a name. Starts with an M, and that on top, you're gonna see a lot of the soy sauce, and that's extracted through like a tube that you can press and pressure out. You can spoon it out, some tilt and spoon. The best is if you put it into, and this is the moromi that we were talking about, put it on top of some sort of sieve cotton, and then you pretty much, kind of like a nut milk bag, you squeeze it out, and then if you put a weight on it, slowly and gently squeeze it. That's apparently the best. You can tilt and scoop, but again, those 2 are the best to get the most soy sauce out of there. And then cheesecloth that was used up here is actually not the best to cover aerobic ferments. The best is going to be just a cloth. Okay, so like, yeah, cotton cloth, like a t-shirt, or usually there's like small kitchen towels. That's the best. And then probably runner-up is coffee filter paper towels. People don't use that because sometimes coated with something that if it falls in the ferment, it screws the ferment. And yeah, so okay. Water kefir ferment. So how this is done is you pretty much have 60 grams of sugar, 60 grams of starter, which can water kefir grains, you can buy them online. You can get a fruit and just ferment it in sugar water, and then it's going to be 1 liter of water, and that ratio will get you, and you need some minerals from somewhere, and those minerals, it's going to be 1 or 2 small pieces of fruit, probably 2 centimeters wide in diameter. That is going to be what you need, and it usually goes pretty quick. And that contrasts with kombucha, which is slower. Okay, usually it takes weeks. This water kefir takes 2 to 3 days. Kombucha takes 2 weeks. It's mainly aerobic. That's why you see kombucha floating on the top. To a lot of, the oxygen is how it grows. This is mostly anaerobic, you could argue, and because of that, it actually gets mostly acetic acid bacteria in kombucha, and then the anaerobic gets you more lactic acid bacteria. So they pretty much, the AAB and the LAB flip. Also for kombucha, they feed on polyphenols as high in the mineral low, whereas water kefir, not so much polyphenols, but you do get this crazy mineral dependence. And there are similarities, but that's kind of how they're different and how the results are different. Okay, and yeah, pH is going to be lower in kombucha usually than water kefir. So, as the ratios we were talking about, for minerals and nutrients, usually it's some sort of, like here you have a raisin, lemon peel, fig or ginger, something like that. And then for mineral source, a lot of people use molasses. They can use up to a tablespoon, but if you use too much, it favors yeast. Some people use eggshells and sea salt. If it's like non-iodized Celtic sea salt, it's only the backup option. So these are going to be your minerals, which is key, as we covered up here. Where is the high mineral? Yeah, here we go. And that is pretty much it. And there's this last question is, if you put something in the fridge, do things change? In the short term, no. Things get slower, but you won't lose CFU, you won't lose diversity for the most part, in any significant way. Yeast start to get kind of downplayed. Lactobacillus also eventually down, and Leuconostoc starts to thrive. Acetic acid bacteria also gets down eventually in long-term cold. We're talking months for most ferments. But again, usually still very potent in the fridge, just slower ferment. So don't be afraid to put it in the fridge.